At the end of the day, gold was never the real story. It was the man behind it. Tony Beets didn't just mine the earth. He mined chaos, fortune, and fame all at once. From the moment he stormed onto Gold Rush in Season 2, everyone could tell something different had entered the game. The other miners noticed first. Quiet looks, low whispers, and that uneasy realization that the Klondike had a new king, one who didn't play by anyone's rules. At first, he seemed like just another grizzled prospector with a heavy accent and a stubborn streak. But those who watched closely could tell there was more to him. The machines, the dredges, the iron temper, they weren't just tools of the trade. They were pieces of a man who had clawed his way up from nothing. And when Tony Beets set his sights on something, you could bet the ground would move before he did. People said he was trouble. Others said he was a genius. But as the cameras rolled and the gold flowed, the truth began to reveal itself piece by piece. The question wasn't why people didn't see it coming. The real mystery was how we all missed the signs. Signs that told us Tony Beets wasn't just chasing gold. He was chasing a legacy that would outlast everyone who doubted him. Tony Beets was born on December 15, 1959, in Weidenes, a small, unassuming village tucked in the farmlands of North Holland, Netherlands. It wasn't a place of wealth or noise, just windmills, muddy fields, and hard work. Life there was simple but unforgiving. Every day began before sunrise and ended only when the body gave up, not when the clock said so. From a young age, Tony learned what work really meant. There were no shortcuts, no easy paths. His hands were calloused long before most kids his age even understood what labor was. In Weidenes, people didn't talk about dreams. They talked about getting through the day. But even then, Tony wasn't like the rest. He carried a spark, an itch to break away from the monotony that surrounded him. He went to local schools, but sitting behind a desk never felt right. Lessons about numbers and theories meant nothing to him. He wanted to build, to move, to feel the strain of a real day's work. The classroom was confinement. The outdoors was freedom. Those early years forged his discipline and his defiance, two traits that would define his entire life. Weidenes didn't produce dreamers, yet somehow it produced a man who would one day change the meaning of hard work itself. By the 1970s, the Netherlands offered stability, but little adventure. It was a country of routines where futures were predictable and ambition had boundaries. Tony could have stayed and worked the land like generations before him. He could have raised a family, tended cattle, and lived quietly. But deep down he knew that wasn't living, it was settling. Tony wasn't born to be ordinary. He had a restlessness that didn't fit the rhythm of Dutch village life. Every day he looked around, seeing the same faces, the same jobs, the same cycles. The more he saw it, the more he realized he wanted out. He wanted something uncertain, something that tested him. The farms had taught him discipline, but they couldn't give him purpose. He wasn't content earning just enough to survive. He wanted to build something massive, something that no one from Weidenes had ever dreamed of. When he spoke about leaving, people laughed. They called him reckless, foolish even, but he didn't care. To Tony, comfort was the slowest kind of death. And as the world around him settled into predictability, he started planning his escape, not from hardship, but from limitation. He didn't yet know where he would go or what he would find, only that staying meant surrendering the fire inside him. The Netherlands had given him his roots, but it couldn't contain his ambition. Somewhere between the long work days and restless nights, Tony met Minnie. She wasn't just a partner in love. She became the foundation on which he would build everything. Like Tony, she understood struggle. She had seen what it meant to live without luxury, to work for every small victory. They clicked instantly. Both shared a rare mix of realism and courage. They didn't believe in waiting for opportunity. They believed in creating it. Minnie was practical but fearless, and she matched Tony's drive step for step. Together they dreamed not of comfort, but of conquest. Marriage came early, but it wasn't about romance alone. It was a partnership built on survival, vision, and shared grit. The two began talking about leaving their small Dutch world behind, about finding a place where the horizon wasn't already claimed. Canada was a name that kept coming up, a vast, cold, untamed land full of stories about gold, lumber, and endless opportunity. It was dangerous, uncertain, and everything they had ever wanted. Tony and Minnie didn't have wealth, connections, or guarantees. What they had was faith, in themselves, in their endurance, and in the promise that somewhere out there, something bigger was waiting. That decision, born out of faith and defiance, would change the course of their lives forever. In 1984, Tony and Minnie took the biggest gamble of their lives. At just 24 years old, Tony packed everything he owned, which wasn't much, and moved to Canada with his young wife. They arrived with no money, no job, and no idea what lay ahead. The first years were brutal. The language barrier made every interaction harder, and the cold was unlike anything they had known in the Netherlands. Tony took whatever jobs he could: construction, farm work, manual labor, anything that kept food on the table. Some days that meant 14-hour shifts for barely enough pay to get by. But Tony didn't complain. He couldn't afford to. Every struggle only made him more determined. The thought of going back never crossed his mind. Canada was supposed to be their chance, and he was going to make it count. Minnie stood by him through every setback. Together they built a life out of nothing, slowly, painfully, but with purpose. Many would have broken under the weight of those early years, but not Tony. Each day in Canada hardened him, sharpened him. The boy from White was turning into something new, a survivor, a builder, a man who refused to lose. And then one day, he heard a word that would change everything: Yukon. It started as a rumor, a place far to the north where fortunes still waited in the ground. The Yukon. The name itself carried history, echoing the great Klondike gold rush of the late 1800s. Most people dismissed it as a relic of the past, but Tony heard something different. He heard potential. By that time, life in British Columbia had become steady but stagnant. Tony didn't move halfway across the world to live an average life. The Yukon, harsh and remote, called to him like a challenge. Long winters, isolation, dangerous terrain. It was exactly the kind of place that scared most people away. To Tony, it was an invitation. When he first arrived in Dawson City, the reality hit hard. The cold was bone deep, the isolation intense. But there was gold here, and Tony knew he could find it. He joined established mining crews and started from the bottom. Days turned into nights as he learned the trade piece by piece, running machines, repairing them, and understanding the rhythm of the land. For the first time in his life, Tony felt at home. The mud, the metal, the roar of the machinery. This was where he belonged. It wasn't the Netherlands or even Canada's cities. It was here, in the frozen heart of the Yukon, that Tony Beets found his purpose. In the Yukon, nothing came easy. Every ounce of gold was a battle, and every mistake cost dearly. Tony started from the very bottom, just another worker with dirt on his hands and ambition in his heart. He operated machines, dug trenches, and endured conditions that would break most men. But Tony wasn't most men. He watched, listened, and learned. Every sound a dredge made, every way a hose could freeze or an engine could fail, he committed it to memory. He didn't just work the machines. He mastered them. Within a few years, he wasn't just an employee. He was a force. People began to notice his instinct for problem-solving and his refusal to quit. The longer he worked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a job. It was destiny. The Yukon tested every part of him, his patience, his strength, and his resolve. But Tony thrived in it. He built relationships, earned respect, and started buying equipment of his own. Slowly, the small-time worker turned into a full-fledged mining operator. The transformation was complete. Tony Beets, the Dutch farm boy, had become Tony Beets, the Yukon miner. And the best was still to come. Through the grind of building his mining empire, Tony and Minnie raised their family. They had 4 children: Kevin, Monica, Mike, and Bianca. Each child grew up surrounded by the same values that had built their parents' success: hard work, honesty, and resilience. Life wasn't glamorous. The Beets family lived where the work was, often in rough, cold camps far from civilization. But Tony made sure his kids understood what it meant to earn a living. He didn't believe in handing out comfort. He believed in teaching grit. When the children were old enough, they joined the operation. The Beets family wasn't just a household, and it was a workforce. Tony's leadership at home was as firm as it was in the mines. He expected effort, responsibility, and commitment. His philosophy was simple: no excuses, no shortcuts. It wasn't an easy upbringing, but it was real, and it created a bond built on respect. Despite the hardships, the Beets family thrived. Their story was one of endurance and unity, a testament to what could happen when faith and hard work met in equal measure. By the time Tony hit his 40s, he had not only built a family but a legacy, one that was just about to catch the world's attention. Decades of work turned Tony Beets into a legend in Dawson City. He had gone from a laborer to one of the most successful independent miners in the Yukon. His operations grew, his equipment multiplied, and his reputation as a tough but capable boss spread quickly. Tony wasn't just good at mining, he was relentless. When others gave up after a bad season, Tony doubled down. He knew that persistence was the real currency of success in the gold business. By the early 2000s, he owned several claims and had built a team that shared his discipline. He had learned every angle of the trade: geology, machinery, logistics, and risk. There was no aspect of mining he couldn't handle himself. And yet, for all his success, Tony remained a mystery to most of the world. Outside the Yukon, few had ever heard his name. But that was about to change. The Discovery Channel was about to launch a show that would make gold mining a global fascination. And when they came looking for a real miner, someone who embodied grit, intelligence, and danger, they found Tony Beets. By 2010, Gold Rush had already introduced audiences to Todd Hoffman and his crew of dreamers. The show needed contrast, someone who wasn't guessing his way through mining but actually living it. That's when producers heard about Tony Beets. When they first approached him, Tony wasn't interested. Television sounded like a distraction. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing gold. But the producers persisted. Eventually, the idea of more exposure and financial benefits convinced him to give it a shot. In 2011, Tony appeared on Gold Rush Season 2, and the entire dynamic of the show changed. Fans immediately took notice. Here was a man who didn't fake it for the camera. His accent was thick, his temper fierce, and his work ethic unmatched. Tony didn't care about politeness or performance. If something broke, he cursed. If someone slacked, he let them know. The audience loved it. Finally, they were seeing a real miner in action, not a TV personality pretending to be one. What started as a small role quickly grew into a defining presence. Tony Beets had become the embodiment of Yukon mining, raw, unfiltered, and unforgettable. The world couldn't get enough of Tony Beets. His appearance on Gold Rush made him one of the most recognizable figures in reality television. But unlike most stars, Tony never changed who he was. The same stubborn, straightforward man from Biden has now commanded millions of viewers each week. His fans admired his no-nonsense attitude, while his critics called him too harsh. But that was Tony, direct, passionate, and unapologetically himself. His heavy Dutch accent became his trademark, and his booming voice turned into the sound of authority on the show. Behind the scenes, he continued expanding his mining empire. Every deal, every dredge, every risk was another step toward greatness. Fame didn't distract him. It amplified his legend. Even the tension with other miners, including moments of rivalry and confrontation, added to his reputation. Tony Beets wasn't playing a character. He was the character. He didn't just bring realism to Gold Rush, he became the reason people tuned in. The king of the Klondike had officially been crowned. Today, Tony Beets stands as one of the most successful miners in the modern Yukon era. His business, built from scratch, continues to operate at a scale few can rival. What began with a single move across the ocean became a dynasty carved into frozen earth. His children now play active roles in his operations, ensuring the Beets name endures long after the cameras stop rolling. He's turned fame into opportunity, but never let it cloud his roots. For Tony, mining was never about the show. It was about the chase, the challenge, and the reward of hard-earned success. He remains a man who believes in effort over luck and work over words. From a quiet Dutch village to the brutal gold fields of the Yukon, Tony's story is a testament to the human spirit's capacity to rise above limitation. When he looks back now, he doesn't see a celebrity or a TV personality. He sees a man who did what he said he would, who took the hardest road and made it his own. The gold may come and go, but Tony Beets' name is etched in history, not just as a miner, but as the king of the Klondike. In the years following his major rise, Tony Beets didn't rest on his laurels. He saw clearly that the ground he was working, the frozen, rugged terrain of the Yukon and the Klondike, was changing. Gold prices were surging, machines were growing bigger, and the competition was intensifying. Tony responded by scaling up his operations. He invested in new wash plants, newer dredges, and expanded claims. For example, reports show the Beets family built a large new wash plant costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, reflecting Tony's willingness to gamble big. YouTube +2 IMDb +2. At the same time, he embraced innovation in his own way, not flashy tech for tech's sake, but upgrades that paid off under brutal conditions. He knew the terrain, the machines, the seasons. He leveraged that knowledge to reduce downtime, keep the crew moving, and extract more value from older claims. But the scale also meant greater risk. With bigger equipment and larger operations came bigger costs, harsher weather exposures, and bigger burdens. Tony's attitude remained the same. The bigger the challenge, the more satisfying the haul. For a man who once arrived in Canada with nothing, this was a new kind of hunger. His family was fully involved. His children and extended crew took on more responsibility. Tony was no longer only a frontline worker. He was an owner, a strategist, a legacy builder, and in the process, the legend of Tony Beets grew taller. No story of mining and success is without its darker stretches. Even Tony Beets hit seasons where the ground didn't play nice, the permits got tricky, and the costs soared. By season 15 of Gold Rush, for instance, Tony and his crew were battling equipment failures, harsh timelines, and weather that refused to cooperate. He also faced issues with claim rights, water licenses, and environmental constraints, the kind of realities that modern large-scale mining must contend with. Reddit threads from fans of the show suggest that even Tony's usual dominance doesn't shield him from the politics of royalties, land access, and production goals. Yet for Tony, these challenges were only fuel. He treated each malfunction, each frosty setback as another test of his resolve. When the trommel broke down or ground froze over, he was in his element. Not because it was easy, but because the roadblocks forced him to push harder. In doing so, Tony showed a side of mining many viewers forget. The business is part machine power, part weather fate, and part gut instinct. He had become as much negotiator as digger, as much deal maker as operator. And that's what kept him ahead when others might have bowed out. As his career matured, Tony Beets didn't simply hold on to the reins. He handed them out. His children, Kevin, Mike, Monica, and Bianca, were brought into the fold not as bystanders but as part of the operation. He trained them in the trenches, exposed them to failure and success alike, and treated them as miners, not just heirs. Kevin, for example, took on independent management of Scribner Creek under Tony's oversight in recent seasons of Gold Rush. TV insider Tony used his family crew model to instill the values he grew up with: physical labor, honesty, responsibility, and refusal to quit. But at the same time, he let the next generation make their own mistakes, build their own stories. This dual role, of father and foreman, created tension, yes, but also purpose. Tony cared deeply that his legacy be more than his own deeds. He wanted the Beets name to sustain beyond his time in the dirt. And so mentorship became part of his identity, not just extracting gold, but extracting potential. He coached machines as well as minds. He drilled the drills in his equipment and drilled the mindset into his children. Nothing comes easy, and winning isn't handed out for free. With fame came a new dimension of Tony Beets' life: the cameras. On Gold Rush, Tony was no timid miner. His thick Dutch accent, no-bull attitude, and sudden eruptions of temper made him memorable. But off-camera, the stakes were higher. He had become a brand. With that brand came publicity, interviews, networks, deals. He negotiated for better equipment, better investor relationships, and media exposure that turned his mining claim into more than just a claim. It became a story. His persona helped the show, and the show helped him. Yet Tony never fully gave in to performance. The line between being real and being for the camera blurred, but he always leaned toward reality. He didn't polish his accent or soften his words for fans. He stayed authentic, and that authenticity became part of his public value. Media also brought scrutiny. Critics questioned the sustainability of his operations, the environmental impact, the long-term viability. Tony answered by doing what he always did: show up, dig deep, deliver results. He faced the camera as he faced the dredge, with grit, volume, and confidence.